So, just at the outset, prior to your casting of Sophie's Choice, were you aware of Alan's work before Sophie's Choice ever came into your knowledge or purview?
Well, back in those days when I was first sort of beginning, I didn't pay attention to who the director or producer or designers of pictures were, of movies. I just paid attention to the story and the actors, and sort of I was more like a fan than an actual cinephile, and I didn't follow the work of certain directors, and I just wasn't that person.
So when you learned that...
I went to the movies like people go to the movies, but I wasn't following, the work of somebody. I knew that he was the director of All the President's Men, and that's pretty much all I knew. I knew he had produced To Kill a Mockingbird, but I didn't know anything else.
So when you learned that he was going to direct Sophie's Choice and he was actually also adapting it, I know there's a backstory about how you wanted to pursue him and get that role. Do you have any memory of kind of what went on with your wanting to really, get in there and see him and your meeting with him?
Yeah, that story's become sort of apocryphal. And not true. What I remember about it was that William Styron, when I was at Yale, when I was a student, in graduate school, William Styron lived on Martha's Vineyard in the summers with in a community of people, one of whom was Robert Brustein, who ran the Yale School of Drama. And so when he was writing the book, they were talking at dinner or something, and Brustein said, I have there's a student at the school that you should really see for this part. And that was me, but that was years before he said, well, I'm never going to make a movie out of this, Bill Styron. But then years later, Styron was represented by the same agent. This is such a long, boring story that is nothing like the really interesting story, which is out there, which is that I wanted that part, and I made them, give me an audition. And
so that's not true that you were willing to audition for him?
Willing? Of course I was willing. I hadn't made that many movies.
No, you were an Oscar winner by that point.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, you always have to, convince people that you can do something. And usually you have to audition when you're young, and I fully expected to audition. Everybody else was. No, the reason I'm telling you this story about when I was still a student and the connection with Styron is that the book was already on my radar because the dean of the school had said, that you have to find out about this story. You'd be great in this part. So I knew about it, but it was years later that they were getting a film made of it. The book had been published, I think, and was an enormous critical and commercial success. So I said to my agent, he said, they're going to make, because he was also William Styron's agent, and he said they're making this film, but they're looking at famous. He wants a foreign actress. He wants Liv Ullmann, or he's looking at a Czech actress, or I think some.
Yeah, one of them was named Magna Vasarova or something.
Okay, so probably, I don't know if she was Czech or Russian. Or
Czech, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, I said, well, I would really like to audition for it because I know about it. And he said, well, I'll get you in there. because it was his client, Sam Cohn, the great Sam Cohn, wonderful, wonderful agent. So, in fact, I don't even remember if he represented Pakula as well.
I don't believe he did.
Okay.
I can check, but
I don't know. See, this is what I mean. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't follow stuff like that.
But when you first met Alan,
But Sam Cohn got me an audition.
right?
And, you know, it was a courtesy meeting. And I went and met Alan, and he said, you know, I'm casting this woman. I'm very glad to meet you. There are other, you know, things maybe you could audition for. But I said, I can't remember if I tried out my Sophie accent. I don't think I did. I don't think I had it yet. But I just said I would, you know, really love to try. And I don't know why he cast me. He did.
You don't know why?
No.
You never took him aside and asked him and said,
No.
What? No.
Don't look a gift horse, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But by the time you did start read-throughs and rehearsals, you did have the accent down.
Yes, the rehearsal process was really interesting because on no other film that I've ever worked on was there this level and this amount of time given over to rehearsal. And when I say rehearsal, it was more like Talmudic study. We sat around a table. We never got up. We never acted. You know, we just talked about the story and the script and the book and the adaptation and the motivations of people and the why. And basically we got to know each other. And I don't really... I have the shittiest memory. I just don't remember much. But I can't remember when I sprang the accent on them.
It was during rehearsal. And
Oh,
Kevin
it
Kline
was in
commented,
rehearsal.
Yeah, like that it became a different person in the room.
Yeah. I think it was pretty early on, and I never got out of it. But I was really nervous about, you know, coming in with this other being who I understood, but who wasn't really like me.
Alan, as a director, I know people have said, actors specifically, have said he's the idyllic actor's director.
Oh.
He had such an embrace of actors. Can you just give us a little detail on that?
Well, for one thing, Sophie's Choice is the last movie where pretty much every day we started at 8 and we finished at 6. I stopped and shopped on the way home and cooked dinner every night for my family, which was just my son and my husband. But it was a finite day. And we didn't start shooting until pretty much noon after lunch. He would shut down. Everybody would report to work at 8 o'clock, and he'd say, "Now go away." Everyone, you know, they'd say, "Go into the tent." And we would have the run of even though we'd had our rehearsals, we had the run of the set for the whole morning. And we'd try out the scenes and block them and change them and evolve them and rehearse them. And then Nestor would come in, the greatest cinematographer, and he would see what we had done and he would light it. We'd come back after lunch and shoot from 2 to 6. We'd get the whole day. What people would, you know, take 17 hours to shoot.
So you're saying that experience hasn't been repeated since Alan
No.
is like working with no other director?
No one else worked that way that I've seen.
I've heard you describe him as a director, but with a literary man with a director's hat on.
Yes. Yeah. I've also described him as a counselor. He's like a rabbi. He was like someone you could, you felt very safe with, exploring extremes of emotion. He was a great listener and a soft presence. He was a very strong man, but with a sort of a yielding, listening quality to him. So, as actors, we wanted to give him everything.
What can filmmakers learn from him? What style of directing did he employ on set that, beyond the rehearsal and how he conducted it? You know, he was known, Hannah, his wife, used to say he was more of a psychiatrist than a director.
Yes, he was more of a psychiatrist than a director.
And you like that as an actor?
I don't think I would like it from anybody but him, because he was he had such an empathetic, judicious eye. You thought he would make the right decisions about things. I think the hardest thing for Alan was to cut the movie at all, because he loved every second of it. You could feel that. And I remember once he called me and said, "I want you to see the film. I have the film." He says, "It's a little long." And it was a 5-hour version.
Whoa.
And I loved it. It was like, binge watching something. And it took its time. And he said, "I just wanted you to see everything we have, and now I'm going to have to cut it." But he was so emotionally invested in the world he was creating. And one of the things I remember most vividly about him is we all would sit in 3 chairs, Peter and Kevin and I in the makeup room of the studio where we shot on 10th Avenue. And we were sitting there getting made up, and Kevin Kline was always trying to take some of my makeup, He didn't really realize who was the leading lady. Anyway, we saw Alan in the mirror, looked in the mirror, and there he was in the doorway, and he had little tears in his eyes. And because we knew the film was precariously financed, and he had mortgaged his house to get it made, we thought, "Oh my God, what's wrong? What's wrong? Are they pulling the plug?" And he said, "No." He said, "No, we're halfway through." And he was sad that it was already halfway over. Oh, he was something.
Have you ever spoken to other actors about their experiences with him?
I'm trying to think.
Julia
Well,
Roberts.
Kevin and Peter.
Yeah, we interviewed Julia Roberts 2 weeks ago. She
Oh,
said,
yeah?
I've never compared notes with anyone about Alan. I was kind of shocked by it because it just seems like if you had such an idyllic experience, you would kind of, anyone else who had that experience with Alan, you would trade notes about it a bit.
I haven't, Mike Nichols said once, he said, every director wants to know secretly what it's like with other directors. It's like, he said, "Am I as good as him?" And so we don't, actors don't talk about directors unless they hate them. And then you can't shut them up. It just never.
Which is
And
why no one
another
talks
thing.
about
Oh,
Alan.
let me tell you what this. No, we don't talk about the ones we love because we keep it secret. But yeah, I mean, weirdly, you don't see people that much. I don't over the whatever thousands of movies I've made. You know, I have on two hands the people that I stay in close contact with. Because you meet 300 people every 4 months, and you get all their names by the end of the shoot. And
Were
then
you,
everybody goes away.
did you ever have another opportunity to work with Alan? I know you didn't do a movie after that, but were there any talks ever about doing a role with him again?
I remember talking about something he was doing, but it never worked out. So what was that? I can't remember what the potential thing was. It wasn't anything he eventually made. He just was talking about maybe doing something.
His style of filmmaking, could he be existing today, do you think? Are his films, to me, they're time capsules. They're very important films. I don't think he's getting the recognition that he should. If you go down the street, most people wouldn't know the name, but they know the movies. I think industry insiders know the name, obviously, but you know, I just think he's lost a bit as far as his contribution. Would you say that?
Gosh, not in my mind. So I don't have a full assessment of the world, but I think that it's just sort of inevitable now with everybody. You know, there's a proliferation of product and work, and we're inundated with what we see on screens. And inevitably, you know, people walking down the street don't know who George Cukor is or John Ford, or they don't care who Francois Truffaut was or Bergman. Nobody knows any of these people anymore. It's a sweep of history. But the work lives. The work is great, and sometimes, you know, your millennial child will say, I saw a great film. And you go, yeah, you know, it's by Antonioni. Yeah, that's a great film.
Speaking of which, have your children seen Sophie's Choice? And do they respond
Yes,
to it?
I irresponsibly showed it to them when they were too young to see it. But they were 13 and 11, I guess.
I know it's going to be hard for you to say because it's like choosing a child, but the actual performance in your whole career, I mean, people say it's one of the finest performances of all time. Would you say in your own filmography that stands out?
It's the one most people mention. Most people of a certain age, people of another age say Mamma Mia is their favorite. You know, it's like, okay. And I'm glad that I've had a varied, you know, opportunity to do different sorts of things. Younger women like Devil Wears Prada. They think that's great.
Have you ever watched any of these new movies and kind of said, oh, that's exactly like another movie that was in the 60s or 70s?
Well, no, I think...
Or a movie that Alan would have made, kind of thing. I just don't think they exist.
They exist now. That leisure's taken in the long-form television narratives. I think that's where you'll see a long scene play out, and you'll feel people breathing. And that's why people love it, because it harks back to a time when filmmaking wasn't you know, the camera wasn't telling you where to move and what to look at, and changing the subject every 5 seconds.
I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the scene in that movie. Can you take us through what happened that day when you were actually making the choice and you were in, I guess, Yugoslavia, and Alan, you know, it was late at night, I know it was one take. Take us through that.
It was one take. I used to have an ability, which I don't have anymore, but which is to read a script and pretty much remember what I'm supposed to say. I would look at I'd read the script once, and if it was something that imprinted on my consciousness, my heart, I would remember what I was supposed to say because I identified so strongly with the person. because this was in German, I had to learn the lines, but the translation was there, and I could not read this scene. I couldn't look at it again. So I learned it phonetically, and I didn't want to think about it. It was sort of great that it was in another language, so that I didn't have to think about it, because I couldn't think about it. All I did was had the little girl into my trailer and played with her. We had some toys in there, and then we walked out of the trailer into the world that they'd set up, and it was terrifying. It was terrifying for her and for me. And we just shot it once.
Yeah, George Jenkins, the production designer, he was such a talented man. He was with Alan forever.
Yes.
And he really recreated that.
Yes. Yes, that was pretty overwhelming. They did a wonderful, wonderful job, but I was glad we didn't have to do it again.
Alan didn't want to. He felt like he got it.
Oh, he knew. We all knew we didn't have to do it again.
As a Jewish man, was he kind of experiencing this, through those eyes as well? Was he emotional on set?
He was always emotional on set, and yes, but he held himself together. There was so much to think about. There were so many moving parts in that scene, and it was difficult to capture it. I can't remember if we did. I think it's not true that we only did it once. I think we did it a couple of times because they had to move the camera and capture other things.
A couple of final thoughts. Obviously, Alan had a tragic death.
Yeah.
How did you hear about what happened to him?
My agent called me.
Same agent? Sam?
Yeah. But in those days, it was just overwhelming. And then a week later or so, I thought, well, he lived to be a really old man. Well, that's good. He was so young. To me now, 70s, nothing. And, I couldn't believe it. Just removed from the world.
And when you learned the details of it, it was just so, it didn't make any sense.
No. Really awful.
I know you're about
awful for Hannah.
Yeah. I know you're about to do a film, I think. I've read the headlines with Spielberg. You're going to do the Pentagon Papers.
Yep.
So I'm just curious, are you guys looking at All the President's Men? Because it has a lot of parallels.
Oh, yeah.
You are?
Yes, because the Pentagon Papers opened the door for the Post's resolve in the Watergate thing, and it gave them the bravery to go ahead. It also was what, in a way, made the Washington Post. Those two events so close on each other, which was something I hadn't really understood before, but that the Washington Post was a smaller operation. The New York Times was the eminence grise, it was the real deal.
So you've watched it recently?
I haven't watched it recently, no. But I do know that they were looking at the replication of the offices, because all of the from the film, Spielberg's looking at how George did that, because they those offices have been all torn up and are very different now. So
I'm sure. And as I said, George.
And he said to me yesterday, actually, Spielberg, that he was going to do it as an homage, try to capture that thing that Alan got. One thing I'd say about Alan was that he was really motivated by a personal goodness, and he had sort of nobility about him. And he really believed in the righteous cause, that you have to tell the truth. And he was moral, and that's what motivated his talent, more than wanting the flash of a career or a signature that you could always tell this was a Pakula film. He just wanted to tell an honest story and to tell it clearly. And he was motivated by that. He had self-respect. That's different from a big ego. And that's why he earned the respect of the people that he worked with.
And usually led them to their finest performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just been reading Ben Bradley's book, where he was talking about Alan, sort of that it was a pain in the neck that this guy was just sort of silently everywhere at the Washington Post, watching, listening, that he had this methodical curiosity and was just registering everything, such a keen observer of everything. And that's part of why that film was so great, that level of detail that was important to him. But he was modest. And, in an age of coming out of the 70s and the big directorial egos and the narcissists, he wasn't that. He wanted the work to be bigger than his reputation.